Husayn is the lantern of guidance and the ship to salvation, and the ship to salvation. إن الحسين مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. There is a very beautiful saying, hadith, of our sixth holy Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, where he says, "There are no eyes and no tears more loved by Allah than those eyes that wept and those tears that were shed over Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam." And this is such a beautiful and an authentic hadith that we find in Kamil al-Ziyarat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to our dear brothers and sisters from all over the globe. And thank you for joining us on Lantern of Lights Muharram Summit titled Wisdom Behind Grief Through Karbala with me, your host, Sakina Habib. So Alhamdulillah, I'm sure that we've all been very much engaged during these Ayyam Aza, during these Ashra and Muharram, in attending and listening to the majalises. And really, the true message that we learn is how to bring a great transformation within our souls. And what is the purpose of my existence? And what are some key examples and lessons that I can take from the holy personalities in Karbala? It could be Imam al-Husayn. It could be Sayyidah Zainab. It could be Janabe Rabab, Janabe Layla, Janabe Farwa, and so many more. I would once again, on behalf of Lantern of Light, extend our deepest condolences on the martyrdom of the Master of Martyrs, Aba Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam. Surely there is no day like yours, Ya Aba Abdullah. Now, today's topic might be emotional for some of you because it really will awaken your deep consciousness on what motherhood feels like. That's right. So, today we will be looking into motherhood, as well as how can one tackle grief surrounding miscarriage, loss of a child in particular. Since our theme is connected to grief, wisdom behind grief through the lens of Karbala. On today's program, we will be looking into how we can tackle the issues that are related to miscarriage within our society. How can we help our sisters out there? How can we educate them more about the reasons behind having these miscarriages, and how can we help heal and recover in that process? Let me share some very hardcore facts today with you. Do you know that no one talks about how it takes a woman 6 months after birth to heal a dinner plate sized wound on her tummy and on her uterus? No one talks about how it takes 2 years for the hormones to get back to normal and about 1 year to physically recover. No one talks about how it takes almost 5 years for the moms to find their new identity and meaning. And most women face postpartum depression during this phase due to society's expectations. So here's a kind and a gentle message. Dear society, please be kind enough to the new moms, plus those moms who suffered a miscarriage or loss. Let us, in fact, help them recover at their own pace. Today's program will be more focused on the miscarriages that revolve around some women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives glad tidings to these women. Allah will not burden any soul more than it can bear. The miscarried baby will drag his mother to Jannah if she was patient and sought reward for her loss. And Allah will give a house in Jannah to his slaves who praised him and when he took back their beloved child. So this applies for both the parents. So my dear viewers, let this Muharram be a change of our hearts and inner works. And let us ask Allah to help regulate our emotions and delve deeper into the great masayib of Imam Husayn alayhi salam and internalize his sacred movement in reaching proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's move on to our conversation for today. And please, please, before we move on, I would like to remind you to please hit the bell button, hit the subscribe button to our Lantern of Lights YouTube channel. Keep supporting these conversations as much as possible, because these are such insightful discussions that will really help a lot of the people out there. Please support our Lantern of Light collective journeys, inshallah. So, the guest that we have today on our program, she is a medical doctor with a special interest and BSc in psychology. And she's a mommy of three, mashallah, two boys and one girl. And I would like to welcome Sister Dr. Syra Kazmi.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Sakina. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Syra, for joining us on our Zaynabic campaign, Muharram Summit. Thank you so much for your precious time. And Adam Allahu ujurana wa ujurakum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq to learn a lot of lessons during these Ashray Muharram, inshallah.
Ilahi ameen, ilahi ameen.
Dr. Syra, today's conversation will definitely be a powerful one and something which is very much relatable to, the women. A lot of women go through miscarriages in their lives, and somehow, yet we don't understand the common reasons that exist behind it and the biological process that one goes through it, and the emotional grief that one has to overcome. So I would like to ask you that how common is miscarriage, and what are some of the types of miscarriages that exist? Because not everybody also has that much knowledge of being able to differentiate, like what kind of a miscarriage was this? Why did I have it?
Okay, so Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen Abil Qasim Muhammad wa ala ahli bayt al-tayyibin al-tahirin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, thank you so much, first of all, for choosing this as a topic to talk about, because, like you said, it's often a discussion that's not had. But it's an important one because so many of us as women are affected by this. Miscarriage, according to the UK statistics, 1 out of 8 known pregnancies end in miscarriage. So if you think there's 8 expecting ladies in a waiting area, at least one of them will end with a miscarriage. So what is miscarriage? A miscarriage is classified as a loss of pregnancy before 23 weeks of pregnancy. So anywhere from the moment you find out you're pregnant until 23 weeks, it's known as a miscarriage. The loss of a baby after that is known as stillbirth. So because of the differences in the physiology, in the causes, in the treatment, and so on, today if we focus on miscarriage rather than stillbirth, so the loss of a pregnancy before 23 weeks. And if you lose the pregnancy before 12 weeks, it's known as an early miscarriage. After that, it's known as an interim or late, depending on where in the pregnancy you were. But in terms of types of miscarriage, there are a few types of miscarriage that we hear about when we go to see a doctor or a professional. There's something called a missed miscarriage, which is when the embryo or the baby has died in the womb, but you haven't got any symptoms of a miscarriage. And it's often called missed miscarriage because you don't know it's happened. Sometimes women will go for their 12-week scan, expecting, good news, and they've been waiting for this scan to tell their family about the pregnancy. But unfortunately, on that day, they'll find there's no heartbeat. And the fetus may have, or the baby may have passed away before the 12-week scan, but you wouldn't have had any symptoms, so it's known as a missed miscarriage. An incomplete miscarriage is when your symptoms have started, but some part of the pregnancy has remained in the uterus or the womb, and it needs further removal. And a threatened miscarriage is when you start experiencing symptoms, but the baby is still viable. So the baby will still have a heartbeat, and the miscarriage hasn't happened as yet. You haven't lost the baby, but you started to have symptoms. So that's called a threatened miscarriage.
Okay.
And an inevitable miscarriage is when your symptoms have started, there's still a heartbeat, but it's likely that the miscarriage will complete soon. And finally, recurrent miscarriages are known as if you have 3 or more miscarriages in a row. This is known as recurrent miscarriage, and this is when you become eligible for tests, further testing and things to find out the causes and so on.
Okay, so what does a miscarriage involve, and why is it really not talked about? Like all these miscarriages that you mentioned, I'm sure many majority of the women wouldn't have ever heard of or known about this. So first, tell us, what does it involve, and why is it not talked about so much, Dr. Syra?
Okay, so when a woman is undergoing a miscarriage, we have to think about it like this. So she's done a pregnancy test. Usually, I'm talking about the known pregnancies. You've gone through the emotional kind of reaction to finding out about the pregnancy. You might have shared the news with some people. You start getting those first trimester symptoms. And often first trimester symptoms are the hardest, aren't they? The sickness, the nausea, the tiredness, the swelling, anything, the headaches. Obviously, it varies from woman to woman. Not being able to eat anything, maybe vomiting. And then all of a sudden, if you start getting symptoms of miscarriage, you might start getting vaginal bleeding. So you might start bleeding down below. You might start experiencing severe cramping or pain in your lower abdomen or in your lower back. And it can be quite scary for the lady who's undergoing this. If there is an ectopic pregnancy, which means where the baby has implanted in a place other than the womb or the uterus, you can often get severe pain, a lot of diarrhea, vomiting. You can faint, you can get shoulder to pain, and it's actually considered a medical emergency. So there's lots of things going on for the lady. And why is it not talked about? Often because we are encouraged in our culture and as a society to not share the news of a pregnancy until after 12 weeks. So often, many of us wait until 3 months before we share the news of a pregnancy. So it's difficult to open up about the loss of a pregnancy if no one knew about the pregnancy to start with.
Absolutely,
That's
you're
one
so
of the
right.
reasons. Yeah. And ironically, the reason why we don't share pregnancy news before 3 months is often because of the risk of miscarriage. The risk of miscarriage is so much higher during the first 3 months that we wait for that safety window to pass. However, if we are not telling people about the pregnancy, then it's like I said, so much more difficult to share the news of a miscarriage. Another reason why we don't talk about it is because there is a huge amount of guilt and shame surrounding a pregnancy loss for the woman. And I think as a society, we often look for a reason or a person to blame for the miscarriage. And often it's the woman herself who is blamed. Or did you eat anything? Did you lift anything? Were you undergoing this amount of stress, or were you thinking negatively? Or we always find ways to blame the woman. And I think that's why there's a lot of shame surrounding miscarriage, and people don't want to talk about it because it is often associated with a sense of failure or a feeling of failure as a woman. We unfortunately measure a woman's worth by how well of a role she plays to other people, and especially motherhood is something that we finished in our eyes as a society, which is not true because there are so many women in our history, in our Islamic history, who never had children, and that doesn't diminish their worth as a woman.
Absolutely, you're very right. I just want to go back to how the society pressures a woman, first of all, into this, because I feel like, right from the moment when a lady conceives, it's first of all very difficult to control those emotions and not let anybody know, because I think there's that outer pressure that comes from the society into asking questions like, are you expecting? Is there some good news? What's happening? So a woman also gets a little confused, and questions such as why, for example, if someone had a miscarriage, oh, how was it possible? Like, was she not eating well? Did she do some heavy weightlifting? You were not supposed to strain yourself, you see. So when comments such as these are passed, this causes also a lot of fear in the mind of the woman. Now, even when she wants to conceive the next time, or if she is, she's got all those negative thoughts that are swirling in her mind. Oh, what if this can happen? What if this possibility happens? What if I lose the child, and all these things? So I think firsthand from the society, it's very important for us to be very open and broad minded. Like, one should be willing to accept whatever Allah's plan is going to be. So we should not have that, we should not set a high standard, a bar that oh, we are expecting a child and we have to announce it to the world, and there are no possibilities or chances that anything is going to harm the baby, because this is all in Allah's hands. It is not in a human being's hands at the end of the day. And the example that you gave, yes, we have some very good exemplary role models within the Ahlul Bayt alayhi wassalam. For example, Janabi Kulthum alayhi salam, whom you were referring about.
Mhm.
She had no children, and at the same time she's very well praised in the Ahlul Bayt by Janabi Abbas, Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam himself, when he told her on the day of Ashura that even if you don't have a son, or if you don't have anybody, I will represent as your son. So this is such a great reward that we see.
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely, Dr. Syra. Now, Dr. Syra, what are some of the things people say when they hear of miscarriage? I'm sure the audience is, waiting for this. Usually it's us who do all the, I would say, zulm within our society, but at the same time, we are the most eager ones to know, oh, what are the comments that, go through. So can you share those with us a bit?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that many of these comments are not meant to be malicious. They're not meant to be harmful. They're not meant to be hurtful. Sometimes our own discomfort with what's happened, or the silence, or not knowing what to say, we feel the need to say something. And sometimes what we say can be the wrong thing. So I remember my second pregnancy was a miscarriage. And a lot of people tried to help, but there were some comments that were made that upset me, and I think the people who were making them had no idea. So things like, how far along were you in the pregnancy? So you say how many weeks you were, and then they say, oh, well, at least it was earlier rather than later. A comment like that is, I know that the person saying it is trying to show the woman the brighter side, or the more positive side, but when we say something like this, it invalidates the woman's grief, because we all know that as soon as you see the positive pregnancy test, that's when a woman starts imagining life with a baby. That's when the planning starts in the mind with, okay, is it going to be a boy or a girl? How should I tell my partner? How should we tell the family? Where are we going to put the cot? What do we need to buy? All of these things you start imagining your life with that child. So whether you lose the baby at 5 weeks or you lose the baby at 11 weeks, you've still lost a baby that you were expecting to have. So that's not a useful thing to say. Other thing people say is something like, well, at least you know that you can get pregnant. And that is well-meaning, obviously, because there are some women who struggle with infertility and they struggle with the conception. But
Yeah,
even though the woman knows she can get pregnant, what she doesn't know, because of the loss now, is that she'll be able to carry the pregnancy to term and have a healthy baby at the end of it. So it doesn't
absolutely.
help that fear or that insecurity she has now as a result of the miscarriage.
Yeah.
Another thing that people say is, well, if you've had a miscarriage after you've had a child or other children, well, at least you have children. Some people don't even have children,
True. This is a very
And
common one.
it's very common, and it's very
Yes.
true that there are so many other people in this world who have it much harder than us, who are experiencing loss greater than us, no doubt. However, as we said, Allah only tests us to our capacity. And for us, for the lady who's going through the miscarriage, this loss might be great for her. It might not be as big as someone else's loss in the world's eyes, but for her, only she knows how much pain she's in. So to compare someone's pain or suffering with someone else's, it's nonsensical, because only Allah knows what's in our hearts, and Allah tests us differently based on our ability. So it's almost like saying to a 5-year-old who's struggling with maths and English, at least it's not as hard as your brother's GCSEs. But your sibling who's going through GCSE is at a completely different stage, at a different level. So we are tested according to our level.
Yes.
And, especially in our culture, in our society, we play like a game of top trumps. The game that kids play when they're comparing cards? We compare that with our suffering, and we try to compete with who's had more suffering in their life, who's been through more pain, who has been tested the most.
Absolutely.
But by doing so, you're not reducing the other person's pain, and you're not reducing your own. So this comparison can often make the woman feel more isolated, because she feels that she can't talk about her grief because somebody else has it harder than her. And then it adds to the confusion, because then she feels guilty. Like, I should be feeling grateful, I should be more positive, but I'm not. And the thing is that grief is often confused or mixed with this idea of lack of faith. So when a woman is grieving over the loss of a pregnancy, we sometimes project this thought onto her that you should be grateful to Allah, you should have sabr, you should be, more positive. However, in that moment of grief is not in conflict with sabr, and it's not in conflict with gratitude. And even in the Quran, we see that Prophet Yaqub, who knew that Prophet Yusuf was alive, he grieved for the absence of Yusuf, to the point where he turned blind. But he was obviously one of the most sabir prophets. He was one of the most shakir prophets. He was grateful. He was patient. However, grief is a human emotion.
Absolutely. So I like how you've touched this point, because it's very common within our societies that when one loses, in their pregnancy, oftentimes, we hear comments like, oh, you're being very nashukri, oh, you are being so unthankful and ungrateful, you are complaining, you are crying, don't cry so much in pain, because Allah will show his wrath on you. So as you said, it has no grief has no conflict with our sabr, our patience, and as humans we are allowed to express our emotions because Allah has made us that way, and in no way are we devaluing or undervaluing the essence of Allah, or our faith. Of course we have faith in Allah, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's very important that during grief, whether it's someone's lost a loved one or a pregnancy or whoever, we often we don't feel comfortable when people are crying. We try and make them stop crying. Don't cry, don't cry. But crying is an essential part of the grieving process because it's a release of emotion. Obviously, there are certain statements and certain thoughts that we should stay away from. Things like when we despair of Allah's mercy, or when we doubt in Allah's plan, or we doubt in His love for us, or we say things that, this shouldn't have happened, because then we are maybe doubting Allah's will. However, being upset that it has happened is a natural I think it's a natural consequence of, you only grieve something if you love it. And we know that all love
Very true.
comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another statement before we
Absolutely.
move on I wanted to touch on is, which I think is only particular to the loss of a pregnancy, is someone that says, well, Allah will give you another one. Inshallah, Allah will give you another one. Now, the interesting thing is obviously people are trying to be helpful and they're trying to inspire hope. And inshallah, Allah does give you another one. But in that moment, that woman doesn't know if that's going to happen or not. We said that we have to be accepting and pleased on Allah's will. We don't know in that moment if Allah's will includes a child for us or not. So it's difficult for the woman to accept that statement. And second of all, the loss of that child in particular, whether it's that age gap you wanted with your other child, or it's this stage in your life, or this moment in time, that loss is very individual. It's like someone going and saying to a widow on the janazah of her husband, inshallah, Allah will give you a better husband. Allah will give you another husband. You know, when you think of it like that, it sounds ludicrous.
Yes, it does.
But for the woman who's undergoing the miscarriage or the loss of pregnancy, she can't imagine another pregnancy right now. She can't imagine another child right now. She's
Yes,
in her grief
absolutely.
at the moment. But it's
She's in her.
important to realize that women grieve differently. The same way we see, I mean, every human being grieves differently. You might see children of the same parent grieving very differently. One's very quiet, one doesn't like to talk about it, the other one only wants to talk about it. Another one cries very loudly, another one, starts cleaning up and doing things to distract themselves. So likewise with
Yes,
pregnancy loss, no woman is the same. Some women want to
very
talk
true.
about it, some women don't want to talk about it. Some people want people to know, other people don't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
So it's very important to check in with the woman herself and ask her, what can I do to help? Or how would you like to deal with this? How are you feeling? What do you need? Because the loss of a pregnancy or a miscarriage is about the woman. It's not
Yeah,
about the woman's
absolutely.
family, the woman's mother, the woman's mother-in-law, the woman's friends, or how other people might be feeling, or how other people might be offended. It's about her and her partner and what they need.
Very true. And grief is very personal and non-linear for everybody. Like it's a unique
Right.
process for everyone, and does not follow like a strict timeline.
No.
So as you said, we need to give that space to everybody, and everybody reacts in a different way. There are some people who will question you that you know why are you not reacting to your pregnancy? Like you should be reacting. On the other hand, some say you're really talking about it too much. It's like you should get that sabr and
Yeah.
try to seek
Move on.
some therapy. Yeah, you get all these sort of comments. And then as you said, sometimes even the like, because if a daughter cannot conceive, they say, oh, it's because the mother had maybe some issues. It could be diabetes or whatever, and that's now passed down. So now the PCOS have passed down, or cystic ovaries, whatever, all of that. It's just the comments that really make it the process more painful for a person.
Absolutely.
And
And
Sister Saira.
sorry,
Yes.
Sister Venus, to cut you off. One of
No,
the
no,
common
no, no, please continue.
misconceptions
Yes.
is that if a woman has a great shock during the pregnancy, or she undergoes a extreme stress or some kind of emotional thing, that
Yeah.
has caused the miscarriage. Or what did you
Yeah, I've
do?
heard of that.
Or what did you do?
Exactly.
A woman is already blaming herself. She doesn't need you to give her ideas of more things that she did wrong. And ultimately, medically speaking, we don't know the cause of miscarriage. It's
Yeah.
the highest likelihood is that the early miscarriages that happen, or the miscarriages that happen before 12 weeks, are often due to genetic abnormalities. And that's not necessarily something that you've inherited from either parent, but it can be just when the DNA was replicating, there was a mutation or
Yeah.
something. But you don't know that for sure until you get the miscarried baby gets tested, and that's not available until you've had 3 miscarriages in a row. So ultimately, most of us will never know what caused our miscarriage.
Right.
And it's not
And
necessarily always find the cause for other people.
yes.
to suggest things that we could have done differently.
Absolutely. Yes, and I also just want to add a point over here, like how the society really forces you to have a lot of kids. I mean, even if it's one child, there's always that question that,
Yeah.
when is this first child going to have a sibling? When are you going to give her a sibling? Or at least have two, three kids. I mean, I think it's completely upon the journey of the parents, how they want to go ahead with it, because we have to see so many factors that exist, especially in today's society, today's world and everything. So even that sort of pressure really clings a lot in the mind of a woman, I feel. And
100%. I mean, if I
yeah,
put it
yeah.
like this, Sister Sakina, if I were to ask you how much money do you have in your bank account right now, would you be willing to open up about this? It's a very
No,
private
absolutely.
thing, isn't it? Right?
It's
It's a
a
very
very private
personal
thing,
thing.
yes.
And if someone asked you, you'd be a bit affronted that why,
Mhm.
this is a very personal thing. I don't want to share it. So why
Exactly.
we feel we have the right to inquire about someone else's uterus or someone else's family planning,
Yeah,
it's a very, very personal matter. It could be a number of
it's a very
things. It the possibilities are endless. It could be infertility. It could be personal choice. They could have childhood trauma that they're dealing with,
yeah,
that they don't want to
yes,
pass on to their child or they're struggling with at the moment. They could be having
yeah,
relationship difficulties. They could be having financial difficulties. Maybe they can't. Maybe they need IVF and they can't afford IVF, or maybe they are struggling with other health conditions for which they're on, for example, some drugs that can be tetragenic, which means they affect the embryo. There could be so many
yes,
reasons why. There could be male infertility. I mean, we never think about male
exactly.
infertility. We always
Male,
blame
yeah.
the
Think
woman.
about women. Yeah.
Exactly. But there are so many reasons. And to constantly ask someone, when are you having a child? Have you thought about having a child? You should really have a child. You're not getting any younger. You're not getting, you're getting older, or your child is by themselves
Your
and you need to
biological clock
the
is
clock is
ticking.
ticking. Exactly.
Yes.
Um, it's like asking a senior citizen, have you written your will? Have you bought your land for your grave yet? Because your time is ticking.
Very true.
Astaghfirullah. It's such a mean thing to
Astaghfirullah.
say.
Yeah, it is, of course. I think
But
we
when
need to
we,
respect each other's privacy. Really. We have to
100%,
respect
because
each other's privacy.
Sister Sakina, there are so many women who, after having one child, have tried again and again to have another child, and they've had recurrent miscarriages. Now, if you're not
Yes.
close enough to the woman to know that, then she's not going to feel close enough to tell you that the reason why I haven't had, you know, another child is because I keep losing the pregnancies. So why
Sure.
we think it's our business to remind people? I mean, believe me, every woman and man are capable of their own family planning and of knowing when having a child is a good time for them and then trying. It's a
Yeah.
very, it's a very personal matter.
Very personal matter, absolutely. We should respect, as I said earlier, we should respect each other's privacy, and not really put our noses into people's businesses, because you really don't know what the person is going through. As you gave a very good example, sometimes even after one child, the woman has tried a lot, and she's having several miscarriages. Her body is struggling to keep up. So it's really not good to put out those comments. And also, we never speak about male infertility. And earlier in our cultures, long time back, when we used to determine the gender of the child, we used to blame it on the woman. Like, this is like long time back. Oh, it's the woman's fault. It's a girl, it's not a boy. And then science told us, like, it's the sperm that determines the gender of
Absolutely.
the child. So once again, let us bring that actual education. Let us nurture ourselves and educate ourselves in societal matters as well, that how can these comments really affect a person, a human's heart, mentally, spiritually, psychologically. You are sometimes adding so much fuel to that, where you can actually help these people,
And
um, and
another thing, Sister
especially
Sakina,
women. Yeah,
yeah,
especially
women
women.
we are each other's worst enemy, in all honesty.
Yeah.
I think so. And especially, if a couple is struggling to have children, there's that
Yeah.
assumption that the woman's the problem. So sometimes we find the families of the man saying to him, maybe you should marry again, maybe you should marry someone else, it's really important you have children. But when
Yeah.
we see a woman whose husband is struggling with fertility and who can't conceive, we never say to the woman, you should think about marrying someone else because you really wanted children. It's really important for you to have children. So these
What
are
an
double
irony.
standards. Yeah, exactly. These are double standards that we have
Yeah.
as a society.
Yes.
And this pressure that we get from family or from friends or from our society, it's only adding, like you said, fuel to the fire. And a woman is already blaming herself. A woman is already
Yeah.
struggling with this herself. We don't need to add to that.
Absolutely. Dr. Syra, what are some ways to help someone going through it? How can we help these, like our sisters, starting from myself? Of course, if you have a very broad mindset and you're mentally strong, then you can snap out of these things. Some women can do it, they're strong. But then for some, it really takes a toll on their mental health and they don't know how to come out of this. They're stuck
Yeah.
maybe in their joint families or their friends. The influence of people and all of that. So what are some ways? What would you suggest?
So the first thing I want to let our viewers know is that during the first trimester of pregnancy, our hormones have shifted. And that's why you get the mood changes, the irritability during the first trimester. Now, after the miscarriage, your hormones take time to readjust. Some women
Yeah.
are more sensitive to hormonal changes than others. So some women, for
Yeah.
example, before they have their period, they go through a week of feeling very down, very sad, very teary, or very irritable. It's known as
Yeah.
PMS or PMT. Some women
Yes.
often suffer from postnatal depression or anxiety, and that shows, in one way, a sensitivity to changes in hormone. After
Yeah.
a miscarriage, your hormones come crashing down. So they don't have time to adjust in the same way they do after childbirth, which is a gradual, as you described in the introduction, where you have a gradual decrease in hormones.
Yes.
So it's very natural for a woman to feel upset or dysregulated after a miscarriage, purely from a
Yeah.
biological perspective, purely from a
Respect.
hormonal, a chemical perspective. In those cases, it's important that obviously your GP is aware that you've had the pregnancy loss, and then they can keep an eye on you. It's important to eat well, to keep yourself hydrated, to try and keep your exercise levels up, whether it's, going, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Whether it's going for regular walks, getting out in the fresh air, being around nature, things you can do to help your mood on a day-to-day. But if you find that this is something you are struggling with, and sometimes it can catch you out of the blue, there is help available from charities and things. So I've written down just for reference. The Miscarriage Association is a really good website you can visit, and they have a lot of resources available. Tommy's, which is a charity. Tommy's have a wonderful website where they have lots of frequently asked questions that have been answered, and lots of articles, from how do I deal with my miscarriage to when should I look at conceiving again, or how to tell your workplace, or all of these things. And they also have a helpline which you can ring. It's a confidential, free helpline that you can ring if you just want some advice or you just want to have a chat. Sometimes when we talk to our friends or family, sometimes we feel like we're being a burden on them, or they're getting bored, or they're getting fed up of us saying the same thing again and again. So it can sometimes be useful to speak to a stranger who can give
Yeah.
you a listening ear and a kind word. So I myself have used Tommy's helpline to help in the
Okay.
aftermath of my miscarriage, and I found them really, really lovely ladies, very, very helpful. And then there's Cruise Bereavement Care, and there's lots of other charities available to help. So I would say definitely, if you feel you need counselling, there's lots of free counselling available that you can get in touch with and help through. But as
Mm.
people who around the woman who's gone through the miscarriage, I think the most important thing you can do is be there in the way she wants you to be there. So ask
Inshallah.
her, inshallah.
Yes. Thank you so much for those references. I hope everybody can make some good use out of it. And the most important thing is emotional support that should come from your husband, especially, yeah, your spouse, your husband, and then your family with whom you're, staying with, living with. It could be your own parents, it could be your in laws, it could be friends, the way Dr. Syra mentioned. Sometimes, a stranger gives you a much more you can say an omnipresent perspective. So it's like a fresh perspective that comes from out of the box, and it's much more beneficial. I just want to touch upon the events of Karbala a bit, since it's the ayam aza,
Just
reflecting on the events of. Yes, sister.
I'm sorry, sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Just before we go on to Karbala, just you
Yes.
mentioned the partners. I just wanted to say one last thing that often partners or husbands really struggle with how to deal with their wife having a miscarriage. So sometimes they really don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. They don't have that same emotional attachment to the pregnancy or the baby because they didn't go through the physical changes. Often men will only bond with the child once the child is born and in their arms and they can physically see the baby.
Very true.
So often a miscarriage can also cause issues between the husband and wife. So it's really
Yeah.
important that we keep communication open and quite honest, and judgment-free communication with our husbands so that we allow them that understanding of how it's affecting us and what we need. And sometimes it's good for men to talk about it as well. And I think that the
Yes.
most important thing we can do is open up about our own experiences without overshadowing the person's experience. So
Very
not
true. I
making it
think this is a very important point. Yes, this is an absolutely important point that you've highlighted, because very true. Sometimes our spouses don't even realize the amount of pain that we've went through, and in their minds it's just like, okay, she's just lost a baby that was not even like full term, so what's the big deal. But a woman's body already goes through those hormonal changes from day one, from the time she conceives. People don't understand this. Like they say, oh, it was a small miscarriage, like it wasn't so long, it didn't like reach 4, 5, 6 months. It was like, some people who go through like early miscarriages, they're told, you didn't go through, you didn't have to go through much pain, it was nothing. But the pain is you know it's the same, like for every woman, whether she has an early one, or as you had mentioned, all the types are in the beginning. So yes, this is a message for even the husbands out there, the males, to get to know about the psychology of women, the biology of women also, to be able to connect and understand what she went through.
And Tommy's have a
And
wonderful page on there that say it's help for partners. So I remember
yes.
I sent that to my husband for him to have a better understanding of what I was going through. So it's all about communication.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to mention some points. Yeah, so for example, self care is also very essential. Taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally during these stages, during this time, is crucial.
Mm,
And reminding you that it's okay to prioritize your well being, because many women, they sort of have this low self esteem, and they tend to forget themselves. And it's like, oh, I cannot have any fun in my life. I'm not supposed to enjoy. I should be limited because I lost a baby and all of these things. No, it's very important to embrace your daily rituals. For example, make a cup of tea, take a walk, provide a sort of comfort and a sense of normalcy. during these difficult times to yourself.
Absolutely.
So it will help anchor you in the present. And as I had mentioned, grief is personal and non-linear. For every person, it's a different journey. So it's
Mm.
very important that you celebrate the little things, finding joy in small things. Everyday moments, can bring comfort and happiness. So try to do those as much as possible.
And sometimes
Moving
it
on.
helps. Sorry. Sometimes it
That's
helps
okay.
to, if you want to remember the pregnancy and you want to
Yeah.
remember, that particular pregnancy, you can sometimes make a memory box. You could put the pregnancy
Yeah.
test in there, or you could put the scan picture in there, or you could put a letter in there.
Mm.
Um, However, whatever feels personal to you, whatever feels right to you, um, you could do that. There's even a service that the government provide. It's called requesting a baby loss certificate. So if you've lost the
Yeah.
baby before 21 weeks, I think, or 24 weeks, obviously there's not the registered, the birth isn't registered, but you can request a certificate from them to say that, this pregnancy happened, and it can help you signify the loss and then help you move on. It's not for everyone, but it's an option that's there.
It's an option. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Syra, for sharing that. Now, reflecting on the events of Karbala, so we've heard in majalises how women of the Ahlul Bayt had to endure severe hardships against tyranny, and especially when we see the role played by mothers, starting from Bibi Zainab, salamullahi alaiha. She sacrificed her two beloved sons. Then we see Layla, who sacrificed her, young, handsome son, Janabi Ali Akbar. Rabab, who witnessed her 6-month-old being slaughtered thirsty. So, Dr. Syra, from your perspective, how can us women seek that pinnacle of patience and perseverance from these role models in Karbala?
I think it's so hard to talk about the women of Karbala and what they went through. It's so heart wrenching. We look at the mothers of Gaza at the moment, who we've watched over the last few months lose their children, and the situation they've been in, and it's been heartbreaking. And then you think that this all happened over the space of a few hours in Karbala, and then the women were taken captive, and then they were having to see the heads of their loved ones on spears. It really goes to show that their iman and their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their yaqeen in the hereafter was phenomenal, and that gave them the strength. Because if you think about this world being a fleeting dream, a short period in our eternal lives, then we are able to put our hardships into perspective. And ultimately they knew that Allah loved them and that Allah was just and justice was going to be served. And what they gave in the name of Allah, and they gave in the name of the Imam of their time. And it's really beautiful to see that those women were the pinnacle of strength on the day of Ashura. And their suffering continued even after the day of Ashura into Sham al-Ghiba and beyond. So there's so much to learn from them. And even in particular with miscarriage, if we look at the example of Bibi Sayyida Salamun alayha, in Masayib, the loss of Hazrat Mohsin is brushed over. It's just said as one line, and the Masayib move on. But imagine Bibi is undergoing the loss of Hazrat Mohsin. She's going through that pain of the loss, the physical pain, the bleeding, everything that her human body would have been going through, yet she is rushing after Imam Ali alayhi salam to save her husband, to save the Imam of her time. Sometimes I think, did the blood of Bibi Sayyida drop through the streets of Medina when she was running after Mawla Ali? And because the Masayib are often described by men, this miscarriage Masayib is often glossed over, but really, it's phenomenal what these women have had to go through. And all
Very.
to preserve Islam for us.
You have given a very good example of Sayyida Fatima Zahra. And of course, when we hear the story, how the door was pushed over her. It was a burning door, and there were nails in that door. So when they pierced her body, it's indeed heartbreaking, very difficult to hear that masaib, how her ribs cracked and broke while she had Mohsen in her womb. And still she persevered with a lot of patience and sabr. And in her mind, the only thing that was like a priority was to save the Imam of that time, Imam Ali alayhi salam. So she shows us, that as women, what is our priority, what is our responsibility, according to Islam. Subhanallah. Thank you so much, Dr. Syra, for being a part of today's discussion. I'm so glad that we shared and highlighted some very crucial points. I hope that the viewers will benefit. And, if anybody has any comments to share or feedback to give, please do let us know in the comment section. And
Absolutely.
inshallah, we would love to have you again, over again and again, Dr. Syra, in the upcoming future programs. Is there any final message that you would like to share with all our viewers?
Just to thank you so much to Lantern of Light for having these crucial conversations. And just one last thing I'd say is that we treat these things as taboo, and they really shouldn't be, because so many of us suffer from the same things and go through the same things, but until we talk about it, we don't know, and we feel lonely in it. But everything's a test from Allah, no doubt. And grief
Yes.
is not necessarily a lack of faith, it's a very natural human process.
Jazakumullah. Thank you so much for that beautiful message. So, at Lantern of Light, we care with passion in our transformative services that you, as our well wishers, donors, and supporters, have helped us sustain and grow. And, in all our humble initiatives, we've been able to facilitate several topical issues through these amazing podcasts, live programs, and masterclass programs with qualified therapists, doctors, coaches, Islamic scholars, from our health and mental health well being to emotional and spiritual well being, transforming lives and fostering love and faith. Please do visit our soulful website on www.lanternoflight.co.uk. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our inspirational channel. And please donate generously for our works to continue blossom by making a donation at Lantern of Light. I'll be sharing the details. These are the revised details. Please make sure that you take a note of them. And let us raise awareness together for these projects, and also for the Isal Sawab of all your and our marhumeens, and for the Shuhada of Karbala. So please do donate generously. And Lantern of Light Charity Bank account. The details are Unity Trust Bank, account number 2048493. Sort code is 608301. Account number is 2048493, sort code 608301, Unity Trust Bank. Become a Lantern of Light sustainer and donate generously to be a part of our amazing volunteering team. With that, thank you so much. I'll be taking your leave and signing off. This is your host, Sakina Habib. Please remember Dr. Syra and myself in your du'as, iltimas dua. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And stay tuned for our next podcasts, inshallah.
Salam.